And I think some of the wow photographs, initially you think, gosh, amazing. But then there isn't that added depth to it. I don't necessarily feel it needs to be amazing light, because I think sometimes some of the less spectacular light for certain types of imagery can work incredibly well.
Welcome to the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast. I'm Angela Nicholson, and I'm the founder of She Clicks, which is a community for female photographers. In these podcasts, I talk with women in the photographic industry to hear about their experiences, what drives them, and how they got to where they are now. This episode is with Lizzie Shepherd, who is a landscape, nature and travel photographer based in Yorkshire in the UK. Lizzie is a frequent contributor to photographic magazines and a regular competition judge. She also offers workshops and tuition and is a Photo Speed ambassador. Hi Lizzie, thank you so much for joining me today on the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast. It seems like a lifetime since we bumped into each other in the amateur photographer office in the lift.
Yes, I think it was a lifetime ago, sadly. But yeah, no, it's lovely to join you and to see you.
Thank you. Yes, a lot of things have changed since then.
Yes.
Now, I usually like to start these podcasts by hearing from the guest how they got involved in the photographic industry. So perhaps you could tell me a little bit about your journey into photography and at what point you realised that photography was going to be the career for you.
Well, funnily enough, I actually, when I left university, initially I wanted to be a photographer. I wanted to be a travel photographer, really, but I kind of started off working for a few studio photographers in Edinburgh just because that was some work experience I could get. And then I met my husband and I thought, well, I'm not sure I really want to be away travelling all the time. I'm not very good at sort of being quite that independent. So I kept doing a few jobs for commercial photographers and stuff, but I kind of felt, I guess I probably didn't want it badly enough, to be honest, at that stage. So I just kind of opted to do normal jobs and then kept doing it, in my holidays and whatever. But I'd say not so, not that seriously. It was very much what I call holiday pictures. And I'd done quite a bit of people photography at university, and now I don't photograph people at all. So I kind of, I guess with the travelling stuff, became more landscape oriented. And then I can't remember exactly kind of how it all came about, but I remember outdoor photography. There was an article on a chap called Steve Day who just died. And I remember just reading about him and leaving his job and going for, pursuing photography and thinking, gosh, you don't want to leave these things too late. So I think I just gradually started, doing like writing a few articles for the magazine and things like that, really. And then gradually built it up. I got voluntary redundancy, which helped. And I probably took a while to get things going as well as I should have. But eventually I kind of built things up to where I am now, I guess.
What did you study at university?
I studied English.
Okay, so not photography.
No, but I guess that's been useful for sort of the writing side of things. But I always liked doing photography. And I guess it was something that just, I guess, gradually called to me more and more. But there wasn't sort of some kind of moment where suddenly everything kind of clicked. And I very much had to sort of force myself to be a bit more pushy, if you like, and gradually build things up, because I'm naturally really not that way at all. So I think it took me a while to kind of have the confidence to do that. And certainly a long time, really, before I had the confidence to do things like workshops. So yes, it was just gradual.
Yeah. Did you have any formal training in photography at all, or are you entirely self-taught?
Entirely self-taught. Way back when I did do a few sort of evening classes and stuff, but nothing, very full-time or anything. So yes, just gradually over the years kind of picked things up and kind of worked out, I guess, my own sort of direction.
Yeah. I think if you have formal training, it kind of makes it easier to launch yourself into a career because you've got those end points of, various bits of training stop or you completed, or you set yourself another target to do another module or something like that, and you complete that. And then there's a sort of a logical progression. But if you are a hobbyist, there's a tendency to continually want to improve, and there's no end point to that improvement, is there?
No.
I think, I'd both agree. We're both still learning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, there definitely isn't. I think one of the things that helped me, I know at one point my husband's sort of job was a bit sort of sketchy and we weren't quite sure what was going to happen with that. And I kind of, that almost kind of made me have to be a bit more pushy because I just didn't know what was happening with him. So I think that helped. Almost just needs must kind of thing. And with the workshops, I really had no intention of doing them. It was really only when Alex, my business partner for workshops, got in touch with me about, do you fancy meeting up and talking about doing a workshop in northern Greece, which that particular one took a long time to come to fruition. But that also, I think, helped, having somebody to do it with.
Yes, having someone else ask you, but also the fact that they clearly believe that you can do it, and also they can share part of the load. That's a real incentive to do that kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. For the workshop side of things, that definitely helped. And, I was doing other bits and bobs as well. I don't really now, but I used to do a few commercial jobs, just, I guess, things where people, probably actually some of those came about from when I was displaying work at sort of exhibitions or the old fair and stuff I used to do in the earlier days. So a few jobs through that. And I did used to do kind of some of these weekend fairs and things, but I came to the conclusion that particularly in the north, there were more work than result, if you like. So I ended up sort of stopping doing those. But then, I obviously ended up having work in the Joe Cornish Gallery, which was wonderful while it lasted.
Yeah.
Which was over 10 years. So, that was great and a real honour. Yeah, it was kind of a mixture of things. And obviously the writing, I haven't done so much writing of late, but I used to write a lot for outdoor photography and obviously various other magazines, as you know. Something I should probably do a bit more of again. But it's like all these things, you get into the habit of doing it, and then you get busy with other things, and then you sort of need to kind of get back in there, if you like.
Yeah. You mentioned that your husband's job became a bit uncertain at one point, and that made you steel yourself and start thinking more seriously about your photography. Did you actually sit down and plan anything out that you were going to do?
No, it was more just kind of, I guess, put myself out there a bit more and stop being so sort of shy and retiring. More that, really. It's a bit of a family thing. None of us are probably very good at kind of putting ourselves out there. So,
So how did you find your first clients? Did they generally all come to you, or did you actually seek some out?
Gosh, that is a very good question. I'm trying to actually remember. I think it was a combination. I think, social media wasn't what it is now back then, but it was a bit of a thing. So some were through that. Some were through, people I sort of knew maybe through my sort of previous work as well, maybe. It was just a combination, really. And it was a bit of a slow burner to start with, but then, thankfully the people that came in terms of the workshops anyway, liked it and enjoyed it. And so, either they would come back to other places or they'd tell their friends or whatever. And, oh, yes, of course. And I also started doing talks, again, a long time ago now. But that was one of the things that I was never, ever going to do a talk. And then one of the camera clubs asked me, and I thought, well, I'll say yes. And I thought, I'll go and do it. And if it's really awful, I'll just sort of give them their feedback and give up on the idea. But it went okay. So, yes, again, I don't do as many talks as I used to. But that, yeah. So I guess a few came from that, maybe. And then it just is kind of word of mouth, isn't it, really, I think?
Yeah. Now that it's your profession rather than a hobby, do you enjoy your photography as much, or did you prefer it as a hobby?
Very good question. Difficult one. I guess I enjoy it maybe in different ways. I think maybe the way things have changed a lot now, there's a big thing with, social media has become bigger and bigger, and YouTube and all that sort of thing, which I just don't do at all. And I think to a degree, some of it's become more about almost the personalities than the photography. And I guess that side of things I struggle with a bit because it's just not the way I kind of see it. So I kind of get frustrated maybe by that side of things a bit. But equally, I love what I do, and the workshops, just met so many wonderful people. It's just a real honour really to do that. And likewise with things like, print sales, it's always lovely when people come back. So, there's a lot that's really, really positive. I guess at times, you can kind of feel a bit pressurised and, looking behind your shoulder, if you like. But I still love it.
When you're out in the landscape taking photographs or capturing photographs, do you forget any pressures and manage to enjoy your photography and it's just you in the moment? Or does that play a part? Is that at the back of your mind?
No, absolutely no. That's, one of the things I love most about photography is just being out there and just getting immersed in it. And for me, I think it's the way it makes you see and observe so much that I don't think I would have done otherwise. So, no, absolutely love it.
I know you're not a fair weather photographer, in fact, possibly the opposite. Do you feel more compelled to go out in tough conditions as a professional, or does it make you a bit more picky about the weather conditions because you want to get the light just right, so you wait for it?
That is a tricky one. It will vary. Sometimes I will kind of wait for some conditions that I hope will materialise, although the weather forecast these days can be pretty iffy. Sometimes I'll just think, right, I need to go out and I've got a time I can do it, so I will. I mean, I'm not one really to wait for conditions when I'm out there so much. So I just like to sort of go for a wander and see what I can find, really, and just enjoy being there.
Now, you run group workshops and one-to-one tuition. Do you have a preference, or do they both bring different things?
Yeah, I think they can both be lovely. I mean, I think the group ones, generally speaking, can be lovely because it's typically, I mean, I do a few one-day ones, but it's usually over a period of time. So you get that kind of, repartee, and you get to know somebody better and you get to know what they want better, and you're able to work with them more longer term. Whereas for a sort of one-day one or a one-to-one, typically, it's a much more limited period of time. So it will depend. I mean, I've had some really super one-to-ones this spring with people who just really just kind of seem to embrace everything and really want to learn. Sometimes I think I've had ones where somebody's been given one as a present, and that was actually the case with two of them this time, but they were all, in fact, no, three of them, but they were all really, really keen and really wanted to do it. But I've had some in the past where I wasn't sure it was necessarily the right present for the person. And, it's not that they didn't enjoy it, but you just kind of feel that their heart's not totally in it. Because, you can, with all the best will in the world, you can spend a day with somebody, but, they then got to go away and put that into practice. And there are some people they will, others maybe not.
Yeah, I think you have to be in the right frame of mind, and part of that, I suppose, is making the selection process of which tutor you're going to go to, which workshop you're going to attend. All of that really focuses you in, whereas you've given a voucher for a workshop, it's a bit more of a leap, isn't it?
Yes, I think it can be anyway. As I say, all the ones recently, that definitely wasn't the case, but I just do know in the past occasionally. And I'll actually now, when somebody asks, I will kind of quiz them quite hard about, what they think the person wants and stuff, just to check that it's the right thing. Because I think, it's really important to know that is a direction somebody wants to take.
Well, it's also possible that they've left their computer screen open on your booking page around their birthday time and made sure their partner's seen it. So sometimes there's a bit of direction involved.
Oh, yes, no, definitely. I know, well, certainly that has been the case with some, for sure.
Do you ever get people on your workshops just looking at you like you're mad when you say, right, let's go out, and they're looking at the weather thinking, really? Or are they all really into it and go out with you anyway?
Most of them will come out anyway, but there's been the odd person who's decided that absolute stare-on rain isn't their thing before breakfast. We did our first morning in Greece last year, was quite funny because we were in this village. We had to walk up to the car, and there was actually thunder and lightning not too far away. It was absolutely pouring down. And we thought, this is mad, but we've all got up and we thought, well, let's go. You never know, it might be different where we were going. And we did actually get a bit of really, really fun weather and sort of conditions that we could work with. So, it felt crazy, but it worked out. And everyone came.
I wonder if you should perhaps define fun weather.
Well, no, actually, I mean, it was a little bit windy, but it was a bit wet, but there was some lovely kind of low cloud floating around and a little bit of light. So it was very, very atmospheric. And no, we weren't, there was no lightning at that point. I'm not one for being in rocky terrain with lightning around, obviously, not a good idea.
No, not ideal. Okay. Now, you're a keen printer.
Yes.
And you're a PhotoSpeed ambassador. What is it that you like so much about doing your own printing?
I think it's just the fact that a photograph in print compared to on a screen is just so much lovelier to look at, and the fact you can actually sort of hold the thing as well. Obviously, the different types of paper, I always print on matte papers, so I find that it can look quite sort of painterly. I guess the combination of the fact that I tend to photograph in quite sort of soft, on the whole, often quite low contrast like that, and the matte paper, people who aren't photographers will quite often think they're paintings, not photographs. And I think, for me, and I also think that when you look at a print, you can sometimes notice something that you don't on the screen. So it can be a good way of just deciding what you really feel about that photograph. And, obviously it's lovely when you do get the chance to display them, and even lovelier when people do buy them, because I always feel it's such an honour if somebody chooses to spend their hard-earned money on something you've created. So that's a real treat. But it's something I started doing very early on, so I've been printing for years and years and years.
But why specifically do you choose to print yourself rather than send them off to a lab?
Oh, that's probably just the sort of control freaks. It's really the fact that you've just got complete control of it all.
Fair enough.
And, you can do it when you like. And if you do want to make a few tweaks, you can. I know some people sort of feel that if you've got it all set up right, you should just be able to print it and that's that. But, there's always little tiny improvements you can make, even if it's absolutely fine as it is. So it's just nice having that ability to do that. And I guess if you're selling enough, which I've been lucky enough to do over the years, I'm not a big seller, but I've sold enough to make it well worth my while having my own printer and so on. So that also I think is worthwhile. And also because you can choose any paper you want, which isn't the case everywhere. Although, I do now just pretty much exclusively use photospeed papers. And I could, get them, I guess, potentially to do them for me if I wanted. And I have in the past ones that were too big for me to do. But I just like to have the control of it here, really. And to be able to see it coming off. It's not quite like in the dark room, but it's it's still got that bit of excitement as you kind of watch it come out, seeing for so long as you haven't done something daft or you've forgotten, as I did the other day, that you've updated your Mac OS and the colours have all gone funny. But generally speaking, it's good fun to see it coming off.
I guess there must be a certain amount of satisfaction as well. If somebody orders your print, you make the print, you put it in an envelope or a box or whatever you send it in, and then you send it off. You actually feel like they've done it rather than just seeing a number pop up on a website and know that a print's been sent to somebody.
Yes, absolutely. No, there is that nice. And you get, on the whole, not everyone gets back in touch, but I do get a lot of lovely feedback from people, which is also really, really special. And sometimes they'll send me a picture once they've had it framed, which is lovely to see as well.
Yeah, that's nice. Now, you mentioned the Joe Cornish Gallery, which sadly closed down last year. Do you have any plans for further exhibitions? Because obviously you had your work in there alongside some of Joe's and other photographers.
Yeah, no, I probably need to address it a bit. The trouble is there aren't that many kind of places relatively local to me. I did for a while have some in a lovely gallery in Whitby that has largely kind of paintings, but it has a bit of photography in there. And they're a lovely couple and they love my photography. But the trouble is, it just didn't sell well enough in Whitby. They said, generally speaking, people just kind of didn't seem to want to spend money on that sort of photography. So it's particularly in the north, I think, which is, of course, sadly one of the reasons I think the Joe Cornish Gallery did come to an end. Is it is very hard to sell that kind of work sort of consistently, if you like. And there are a few places that I've sort of talked to before, but I'm not convinced that the sort of photography I do is necessarily that well suited to many of them. I occasionally do things, like Harlow Car, which is a garden near Harrogate, has a sort of shop gallery kind of place, and sometimes people will take that over for a month. So I've sometimes exhibited for events there and things like that, which often does go pretty well, actually. So there's a few things like that. We've just done opened our garden a few times as part of a sort of threesome in the village for the NGS, and I thought I've got all this stuff left over from the Joe Cornish Gallery, so I might as well put it up because I've got a little studio area I created ages ago when I tried doing North Yorkshire Open Studios, which again I just didn't get enough throughput for because I didn't have enough studios near me. But I thought, well, I'll put them up for that. And as I suspected, people who come to look at gardens aren't generally speaking in the market for buying photographs, but got a lot of nice comments and sold the odd card and I think one print. So I thought I've got it there, so I might as well show it because I've got all the stock left over.
So the best way for somebody who's interested in seeing some of your photographs and maybe buying a print is for them to look at your website?
Yes, that's generally speaking now how I sell pretty much all of the prints I sell now. Thinking about it, actually, when you're asking about clients, I think got a few clients from having my work in the Joe Cornish Gallery all those years in terms of workshop clients as well, because people obviously become aware of you there. So that was another sort of lead in, if you like, and certainly a huge privilege to have had my work there for so long.
Now, you judged a few photography competitions, and I know from personal experience how challenging that can be, especially when there are lots of entrants. What's your approach to judging a photographic competition?
Well, when I did El Potti, I was just doing the final round, so that wasn't, too many. For that, I would always go through them initially just to have an overall look, and then I'd go back through and score them, and then I'd go back through again just to double check that I was as happy with my choices.
We should probably point out at this point, for people who don't know, that El Potti is Landscape Photographer of the Year.
Oh, yes. I'm actually judging for the first time the Natural Landscape Photography Awards at the moment, which is really really fun. I mean, the quality of imagery at International is just mind-blowing. There's really a lot of really stunning work, and they've done the initial. The organisers do the kind of initial kind of filter, if you like. So you're pretty much exclusively looking at very high quality photographs, which is rather enjoyable. And actually, they suggested a means of scoring, which I think is super, whereby you initially, well, again, like I have done in the past, you initially just look through everything so you get a feel for what's there just quickly. And then they suggest initially you kind of do a scoring from, I think it's 0 to 3, where 3 are all the ones that you think are the best ones that are possibilities. And then you go to those and you decide the ones that you think are potentially good enough to be in the book, and give them a 4, and then you go and give a few that your absolute favourites a 5. And I found that a really helpful way of doing it, because it just helps you, I guess, weed out the ones which they're all really good but aren't quite as good, and then it's easier, I think, to look at that slightly smaller, well, a lot smaller selection, and they're all ones that you really like, and it just makes it a lot easier, I think, to pinpoint the absolute favourites. So I think that works really well. So I don't know if that's sort of similar, something you've done a lot in the past.
Yeah, similar sort of thing. I think it is a good idea to go through, and there's some competitions I've been involved in. Generally, if you're judging a particular category, I will try and do that category in one sitting.
Yes.
So that I've got the memory of everything.
Yes, agree. Yes, absolutely.
But if they're huge, obviously that can be quite tricky. But you find yourself, initially, oh, okay, and then you see a wow picture, and you have to kind of recalibrate your brain and start thinking, okay, so now, like in your case, that you were talking about the first round, you give 3, so that would be a 3. And suddenly there might have been some others that were 3s, but really they're now 2s, and go through like that. But I find it very inspiring. It can be quite daunting when there are so many pictures, but it's also very inspiring, and it gives me lots of ideas, things I'd like to do. Not necessarily to rush off to the same place and take the photograph, but, the styles and things like that I find very inspiring.
Yes, and also, just seeing, particularly with it being not that the UK doesn't have a lot of wonderful places, but obviously seeing places from all over the world, as somebody that loves travel, that's fascinating, seeing some of these places. And also, it just, not that I didn't know already from the many, super clients who've come on workshops over the years, but you just realise how many really good photographers are out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very, very good work, a lot of very good, talented people out there, which is very inspiring. Sometimes it sort of makes you think a bit, help as well. But
yes, there are so many strands to your business. How do you balance that, and still find time to do photography in a way that is satisfying to you?
Well, I guess now, obviously, as I said, I don't really do any commercial work anymore. If somebody came and asked me to do something, if it was something I was comfortable doing or I felt was within my skill set, I would. I'm afraid I don't, like in the older days, I would occasionally do portraits. I don't do that now because it's just not me, and I don't think I'm good enough at it, to be honest. So I'll sort of, I'll pick and choose a bit. I mean, I did quite a lot of property photography at one stage, but I probably wouldn't. And that, I think, was possibly, through some sort of exhibition initially, bizarrely. But I wouldn't probably tend to do much of that now unless there was a very sort of specific reason. So I guess for those sort of jobs, it wants to be something that I feel I'm going to get a little bit of inspiration out of. I've done something for a local furniture maker a few times, or he also restores furniture, and that's lovely because they're just, amazing, beautiful pieces. So it's nice to, it kind of fits with my mindset, I guess. A couple of years back or so, I did a few jobs for the North York Moors National Park, which was lovely to do. But there was another thing that came up that I just felt was too far out of my skill set. And maybe this is me not being as sort of ambitious and gung-ho as I should be, but I felt the combination of that, and it would have involved a bit more travel than I felt was right, because I thought somebody closer should be doing it. I said, look, I don't think this is one for me to tender for. But it was nice to be asked. So those sort of things, can be quite few and far between. And print sales have definitely been a bit quieter the last year or so, sadly. With the workshops, I think the biggest challenge now is we've got people who've been everywhere with us and some places more than once, and we definitely need some new locations and new themes. But, that takes time and quite often money to set up. So it's not an easy thing just to say, right, yeah, we're going to do this. And in fact, we had one workshop that we thought we were going to do, and in the end, we invested quite a lot in terms of researching it, and we just felt it wasn't going to work how we wanted it to work. So, even though, probably could have sold plenty of places on it, for us, it's really important that it kind of fits, the way we like to work and the experience we want to deliver. So it's very important that it's got to be something that we feel is right.
I guess particularly if you're going to be going back there a few times with different clients as well, you don't want to feel in any way you're not so much that you're shortchanging them, but you're not fully feeling the location, I suppose.
Yeah, or in this case, as much as anything, it was just the logistics and just too many options for things, and perhaps not to work out quite how you wanted. And it's just, and particularly as it involves going abroad, that adds on a whole other layer of complexity as well. So I think it's so important to be sure that you can, obviously that there are things you can never legislate for, but you want to be able to deliver what you believe you should be delivering.
Okay, well, I think that's a great point to go to 6 from SheClicks. I've got 10 questions from some SheClickers, and I would really like you to answer 6 of them by picking numbers from 1 to 10, please. So could I have your first number?
Okay. 3.
Number 3. Do you have a favourite place to photograph, somewhere that you keep going back to? And that was asked by several people.
Definitely a few favourites. I've always said, sort of for as long as I can remember, that my favourite area, which is, I say area, it's a country really, is Scotland. But specifically, I guess, the sort of the Highlands and Islands. And obviously I go back because I say obviously not everyone would know that, but we run a lot of workshops on Harris and Lewis, so I go back there a lot. And there is something very magical about photographing there, although it doesn't have trees really, and I love trees. So, but I've got a few favourites locally, and typically those will be quite old, messy woodland areas that I love visiting, which are sort of not too big a drive. I don't feel one should just drive for miles and miles and miles on a regular basis, because I just feel it's wrong. But there's a couple of woods that I always love going back to. So yeah, several places, but not just the one. But I definitely do enjoy going back to them a lot.
Okay. Can I have your second number, please?
2.
Do you have a bucket list of places that you'd like to explore? That question's from Mary-Ange.
Yes. Some of them probably will never happen, but places that I would love to go to one day, which I think probably will one day, is New Zealand. I'd love to go to, and Tasmania. I'm sure the rest of Australia is great as well, but particularly Tasmania. So I'm hopeful to get there one day. Other places that I haven't. I'd love to go to Greenland. I'd love to go back to loads of the places I've been to. In theory, I'd love to go to Antarctica, but I suspect I won't ever get there. The combination of cost and time and whatever, I suspect it's unlikely, but I know, I mean, it would be an amazing experience if I ever did. That's probably the one I'd like to go to that I think I'm least likely to go to, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Can I have your third number, please?
I'll go for 7.
Number 7. What makes a landscape photograph a winner in a photography competition or awards? And that question's from Renata.
Right. Well, I would say that it is unavoidably subjective. So for me, I guess I want something that, we were talking about wow photos earlier. It doesn't necessarily have to be an initial wow, but I guess it's got to have something that will initially just kind of make me want to look at it further, obviously. It's got to kind of make me feel something. It's got to maybe intrigue me a wee bit. It could be one that's just wow, absolutely amazing. But I typically like things that will make me think a bit, maybe have to work a little, not too hard, but to work a little and a photograph that will really sort of invite me in and make me, maybe want to be there or want to explore there, or just something that will basically spark a bit of emotion and really make me want to know more about it and want to keep looking at it. And I think some of the wow photographs, initially you think, gosh, amazing, but then there isn't that added depth to it. I don't necessarily feel it needs to be amazing light, because I think sometimes some of the less spectacular light for certain types of imagery can work incredibly well. I am a sucker for a good composition, but again, that is very subjective. And there are, I know just from, having been looking through things recently, there sometimes are ones where you can't quite put your finger on why the composition works so well. Sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes there's just something, an intangible. And I think sometimes you can't always explain exactly what it is, but there's just something that really, really appeals and draws you in. But that's the sort of slightly, subjective side of things, because it won't necessarily be the same for everyone. And I know once it comes to the final judging for the one I'm doing now, there will definitely be some very differing views on things. But that's the nature of the beast, obviously.
Yes. That is quite funny, actually, I think, sometimes when you have those conversations where there's an image that you think is amazing and other people have skipped by it, and you say, well, why can't you see it?
Yes.
And then they're talking about an image that they think's amazing, and you kind of, yeah, quite good, but it's not as good as the one I love.
No, I know, but I mean, that's always going to be the case, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what you were talking about, the intangibles, the things that you're not quite sure what it is, but you really love the image. Those tend to be the images that come to me, at other times,
Yes.
I go for a dog walk with my partner and I'll be telling him about an image that I thought was amazing, or, I'm just thinking about it in the bath or something like that. You can remember them.
Yes, definitely the case. And it can be quite hard sometimes to articulate. With some of them, as I said, you can say, oh, well, it's because of this, that and the other, but there definitely are pictures. And I have that with, one or two of my own favourites where I can't actually really tell you why I like it, but it just works for me. And I think sometimes you have to accept that can be so, that it just speaks to you for some reason. And if it speaks powerfully enough, then it's going to be a contender, I guess.
Yeah. Could I have your fourth number, please?
I'll go for 8.
Number 8. Oh, now, Penny says, I was very sorry to see the Joe Cornish Gallery closed. Your work has been on show for a number of years, along with Joe's. As galleries are becoming a rarer space to find, what advice would you give to photographers wanting to exhibit their work?
Gosh.
It's quite a tough one.
That is a very tough one, yes. I'm not sure how qualified I am to answer that either. I mean, what I would say is, certainly it does depend, you see, on your style of photography as well, because I know that some of these events that I tried doing, I know other photographers whose work I love, but it isn't the same as mine, did well there where I didn't. And that can be all down to also, it can be the style of your photography, it can be the pricing, obviously, as well. I think if you live somewhere where there are, things like North Yorkshire Open Studios, for example, in my case, if I lived somewhere where I had lots of other studios open near to me, I would definitely think that was a good option to do. When I did it, I got, I certainly broke even, if you like, but it was an awful lot of work for not enough visits. And that's simply down to where I am. I'm not in the middle of nowhere, but I just if I lived in one of the towns, York or Harrogate or something like that, I think I would definitely do it because I think I would get enough visitors that it would be worthwhile. So I think if you live somewhere where there are other places nearby, then things like the open studios is a good bet. I don't know if they still exist. When I first started exhibiting, when we not first moved to Yorkshire, but when I first started doing photography more seriously, I exhibited with a group called Brigantia, and it was a mixture of different types of artists, photographer, jewellers, all sorts. And there'd be things at various, events, and you'd kind of maybe have a day on duty and then somebody else would be on duty the other days. And so I'm sure there must still be things like that happen. So I guess those sort of things. I think for galleries, it's a tricky one. I mean, sometimes there can be things like, hospitals, dentists, doctors, whatever, who might want to have your work up. Whether you're going to sell any is another matter. So it depends, I guess, whether you want people just to see your work or if you actually want to make some money out of it.
Yes, that's a very good point. I mean, cafes can be very good, but if you're in a tourist area, then they're likely wanting the pictures of that area.
Yes.
But equally, people don't tend to go into a cafe for a cup of tea and a scone with the intention of spending a lot of money. So you may have to price accordingly.
No, absolutely. And again, I think how close it is to you or not as well is because I had a cafe that got in touch with me. I think it was just before lockdown. I can't remember exactly where they were, but they were probably the best part of an hour away from me. And I just felt it just wasn't going to be good because, you don't know what's going to work there. So you're going to want to be able to go in and change things around. And it's just, it needs to be close enough, I think, for something like that again.
Okay. Right. Could we have your penultimate number then, please?
We'll go for, have I said 5 yet?
You haven't said 5.
Okay.
This is an interesting one. Mary says, much of your photography has wonderful calming tones that complement the overall collections. They're beautiful. Can you give any tips on processing the colours to get a fabulous balance in tones?
Gosh, well, thank you for the kind words, first of all. It's a very sort of, people do often ask me about my processing, and I think I touched on it earlier, I do tend to not go for a lot of contrast, be that the conditions I'm photographing in. This isn't always the case, obviously, but a lot of the time, or whether that's the way I process. So I, for example, will often use quite a bit of, I'll lift the shadows a bit. I'll sometimes very slightly just reduce the clarity a bit so things aren't quite as, I guess it just softens things a bit. I think that kind of can add to the sort of perception of the tones. I mean, obviously, photographing in gentle light is always going to give you softer colours. So that side of things comes into it as well. And I probably never put sort of positive saturation in, but I do, sometimes I will, by adjusting the curves, that does in effect bring in a bit of extra saturation. So sometimes, I do one way or another end up adding a bit in, but I don't tend to go for very bright colours. But I think a lot also depends on the camera you use. I mean, one of the reasons I kind of settled on Sony was because I like the sensor. I like the way it produces colour, and it just seems to produce colours that I really enjoy and feel comfortable with. And I know sometimes I've tried helping somebody process a photograph that's been taken on another brand of camera, and some of them I've struggled sometimes to get kind of what I'm wanting. I guess because I'm not so familiar with that camera. So I think that definitely also makes a difference. But, I think, you've just got to, I guess, try and use all the, I use Lightroom and sometimes I use Photoshop to finish things off, but it's probably just trying to experiment with all the different things and seeing what will give you the sort of look you like as well. I mean, the great thing is obviously it's all reversible, so you should really feel able to say, what if I do this, what if I do that, what will give you the look that you like. But I know there are times when people have looked at a picture and sort of said, oh, what have you done to make it look like that? And particularly for some of the areas we go to in northern Greece with this kind of amazing woodland, and then I've said to them, well, wait till you actually see it and you'll see it does actually look like that. So sometimes it's just, because that's the place or the conditions I've photographed in. So I don't know if that really totally answers the question, but
I think that's fair enough. Thank you. Okay, so your final number then, please.
We'll go for 10. I know I haven't said that.
Number 10. Do you plan your images or respond to the conditions?
A bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a great planner. I see people who've clearly kind of worked out that the sun's just going to come into a little arch here and there and do, I'll plan, obviously, for workshops. Obviously, you've got to plan quite a bit for, because you want to know you're taking someone somewhere where you've got a chance of getting X and Y conditions. But for my own sort of personal thing, unless it's a particular photograph I need to get for, I don't know if it was for a commission or a book or something, I generally like to, I guess I enjoy most kind of just going and having a wander and seeing what I can find. But I will, there are certain, places are going to look good at certain times of year, or, if you get sort of frost or snow or whatever. So I will plan in that respect. But I consider myself sort of more of a reactor than a planner, I would say. Unless, there's a specific need to plan, obviously, then I will.
Yeah. Are you looking for cues from the landscape or the vegetation to sort of trigger your photography for that day, do you think?
Yes. It might just be little details, or it might be sort of wider views. But yes, it's just things that, jump out at you, so to speak, and just make you want to try and photograph them. And sometimes there'll be, things that I love looking at, and there's not really a photograph there, but it can be fun trying. And you don't always, obviously, succeed. And sometimes you might get back and think, what on earth were you trying to do there? But other times, you can surprise yourself and find that something you thought wasn't possible, actually, you managed to get something you liked out of. And I think sometimes with those sort of pictures, you have to sit on them quite a while. I do enjoy I'm not one of these people that likes to put things away and not look at them. I know some people just won't look at them at all for ages. I can't do that. It's not. But I tend to have an initial look and a fiddle, and then sometimes just for whether it's because of time or just because I can't quite decide, I'll just leave them and come back to them. And I've still got things I come back to from years ago sometimes that I've never fully gone through. And of course, when you come back to something many years later, sometimes your tastes have changed and your perceptions have changed. So you see things quite differently.
Yeah, software's changed quite dramatically. So you can make selections much easier to, do some selective brightening or darkening and things like that. It's quite a bit more effective.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the software's definitely improved enormously over the years, and obviously your own skills improve, all the time, hopefully. So yes, there's all sorts of different reasons why you might go back to something, and things like, particularly, not that I take a lot of high ISO imagery, but things like noise reduction have improved out of sight. So yes, I think it's good not to be too hasty with the delete button, and I know in the past sometimes I have, and I've got things where I literally start wondering, did I actually go somewhere? Because I know I deleted all the pictures because I didn't think they were any good. And now I think, when did I go there? Or did I go there? Who was I with? It's good to keep a few things just so you know for sure when it was, because it's just interesting to look back.
Yeah. Well, Lizzie, thank you so much for answering all those questions and for joining me today on this She Clicks Women in Photography podcast.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a good fun to chat.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you to everyone who sent in a question. You'll find links to Lizzie's social media channels and website in the show notes. I'll be back with another episode soon, so please subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform and tell all your friends and followers about it. You'll also find She Clicks on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube if you search for She Clicks Net. So until next time, enjoy your photography.